Chloé Messdaghi, and today we're going to talk about how to start a movement for hacker rights. And this is a workshop brought to you by Hacking is Not a Crime, which is an organization that I have co-founded. So let's dive into this, shall we? I'm going to turn off my camera because there's a lot of stuff we're going to cover today, and I only have 2 hours of your time, or maybe it's a little bit less. But anyway, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be in Discord and whatnot. This is a recording, and it is the middle of the night while I'm doing it. Hence, you see a lot of shadows going on. But anyway, I'm so thankful for Grey Hat for allowing me to do this workshop. This is my first ever workshop, you guys, in the hacker community. So I'm thrilled for this. Just note that this is going to be more on a human element, not a technical element. However, there is definitely some strategies that have been pulled in from my experience and from the work that I do in my career. So let's do this. Remember, stopping video, but I promise you I'll be online for you. All right, now let's dive into the good stuff. The reason why you're attending this in the first place. So I'm going to share my slides with you. Hold on one second. Boom. All right, let's begin. So once again, this is how to start a movement. Hacking is not a crime workshop. Before I begin, I just want to reiterate that this workshop is something that has came about from Hacking is Not a Crime and the mission that we're working on. But I also want to say that this workshop is completely dedicated to all the hackers who have been scared to disclose, to all the hackers who've been prosecuted for trying to do something good or doing their actual job, to all the people who are in the fight to bring rights for hackers, and to you, because you're attending this. So there must be a part of you that is interested in how to change the situation that we're in, or you just didn't even think that hackers didn't right, or what are hackers again? Anyway, we'll cover all that, I promise you. So for those that do not know who I am, my name is Chloé Messdaghi, and I am an InfoSec advocate and activist. I'm a co-founder of Hacking is Not a Crime, also a VP of strategy over at Point 3 Security. And when I'm not doing that, I'm also the president and co-founder of WOSEC. I'm also the founder of We Are Hackers, and a podcaster for ITSP magazine, The Uncommon Journey with Alyssa Miller and Phil Wiley. I'm also an organizer for the Hacker Book Club. That's right, we read books. Basically, anyone who has written a book in the hacker community, we read a new book every month, and the hacker community reads it all together, and the author and those mentioned in the book do attend. That is my URL if you want to know anything about me inside or outside of InfoSec, or if you want to call it cybersecurity, whatever floats your boat, you can find it all on there. And last but not least, that is my Twitter and Instagram. My DMs are always open, so if you need to get a hold of me, I am on there. And also feel free to follow if you like. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is basically a big overview of the situation that we're in. And to know the difference between hackers versus attackers, because I just want to hit that one first, just so then you are aware before I dive into anything. And then we're going to dive into Hacking is Not a Crime. We also will call it, HINAC or HINAC or HINAC. We'll be covering the what, why, and how. Also, like I said, the current landscape, but I want to cover a good number of case studies. If you have seen my talk on hacker rights, just note that it will cover some of that in today's workshop, because there are people that maybe have not seen it. So I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page before they start jumping into any actions. Or why should they change anything? Anyway, we'll then go into how do we fix this, such as changing the public perception, how to influence the individual. That's right. I'm going to teach you how to social engineer the brain, but is also a good tip to learn. So if you want to be a social engineer, so you can understand a little bit more how the brain works. How to influence legislation, because we need a change where we stand right now. And also how to collab with organizations. All right, now let's dive into the fun stuff. So let's go into the overview part first. So what is a hacker versus attacker. So what I want to first start off with is to note that a hacker can be called a security researcher. Basically, they use skills to keep things secured. They never extort. It stays within scope. If their scope is on there, they will follow it. And if they need to exploit, it's only with permission that they do so. So the whole thing is that they always get access. It's never been a criminal intent of whatever they're doing. Is trying to help companies stay more safe, to protect consumers. They're not trying to bring on ransomware or phish someone to get data off of a company. They're not doing kind of stuff like that. An attacker, we also call it, is a criminal, a cyber criminal, a malicious actor. This person basically uses skills to hurt. In other words, they are out to abuse something. So, for example, that they will extort for money. They will exploit without permission. They have a criminal intent or purpose that serves them with a purpose, which is to collect money, to get information, to blackmail. That is an attacker, is someone who's causing harm to another individual. So that's one thing to keep in mind between a hacker and attacker. Another phrase that we like to use sometimes in the community is think of a locksmith as your hacker, and an attacker, think of it as a burglar. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to understand the differences. If you see there at the bottom, the Jedi, are you on the light side or the dark side? Just think about it that way, right? The Jedis, if they're on the good side or whatnot, they're using the exact same skills as the dark side. However, they're doing it for a different purpose. And that's the point right there. A hacker and attacker are doing, it's the same lifestyle skill set in mind, but they're doing it for two very different purposes, right? So I want you to think about that. So anytime someone's like a hacker attacker, think of Jedis or Siths. You want to have an understanding, one's on a good side, the other one's on a bad side. But also to note that there are some that are somehow between, and that's okay. We want them to get on the light side, and if they want to be between during that time, they be between that. But the most important thing is if they feel guilt for what they've done, that's something that's a really good thing to hear about, because that means that they're more willing to be on the light side with guilt. If they don't feel guilty at all, and it's all for themselves selfishly, their own gains from abusing or using, then that's someone who is a criminal. All right, let's dive into the rest. So we've covered the hacker versus attacker. Now let's go to the next. So what exactly is Hacking Is Not a Crime? So basically, it's an organization that started with Brian, and how it worked was that he had these stickers, which said hacking is not a crime, which he kind of got like the logo from skateboarding. So basically, I came across like the Twitter profile of Hacking Is Not a Crime, and I reached out and I was like, hey, I did this petition. I have over 1,000 signatures, and I'm looking to partner with someone who is trying to give the exact same push as I am when what is hacking is not a crime. It's whether or not the purpose of the hacking, that is the determination of if it's a criminal activity or not. Not just to mention that in the CFA, last time I checked, is that hacker or hacking wasn't even mentioned in it. So in general, this is a grassroots movement, Hacking Is Not a Crime, that's basically working within the community and outside the community to bring rights for hackers. And how we do it is that we work with the press to update terminology or imagery of the hacker community, because many of us were still dealing with this idea that we're these dark hooded figures in the bottom of our basement. Sometimes we like to wear a ski mask. Which is one of the things they always think of for some reason. Also, the wording that they use, we want to make sure that they're using the correct terminology. We want them to use the term hacker versus attacker when it's sharing a criminal story. We also are working to change the public perception of the hacker community, and that's through social media, that's by working with the media, but it's also working with organizations and legislators to try to change how the people view the hacker community, because there are some biases towards us that we probably all know of. We also work with organizations to push for a change in legislation, because if we want to have real change across the country and around the world, we have to start, with the law. And they're very much out of date. So we need a reform on that. We also partner with the hacker community members to push for advocacy. We do have a list of advocates on our website. And basically the advocates, what they do is they push for the press to be updated on terminology and imagery. They participate in projects that's to bring social awareness to the hacker community, to change public perception. There are also those that are working within those organizations or volunteer heavily with those organizations to bring about a change in legislation. So the advocates are like the bread and butter of hacking is not a crime. And we also work in general to help the hacker community thrive and support them. If there's ever a time that you guys need help on anything, reach out to us, and we would love to put you in connection with resources that you may need to help you thrive in the community. We're here for you, and we just want you to know that you shouldn't feel alone or isolated during this time. We are there for you, and we will try our best to understand what you're going through and to help provide solutions, or at least help connect you to the right folks. So overall, main takeaway, hacking is not a crime. We focus on organizing of advocacy and engagement to support hacker rights. So that is what we do. And so this workshop, we're going to dive into the current landscape, such as case studies once again. And then we're going to go through some actions that you can do. And I'll talk to you about those actions. So let's first dive into the current landscape. And I know this is a very scary subject, so just bear with me here. So here are some case studies. Now, if you've seen my other talks before, I will cover those 2 case studies, but there are a lot more. So here we go. If you do not know this case study, this is a really good one to know about. So Kevin, you see in this photo, is him and another researcher named Sean, they came across DJI, the drone manufacturer, but they basically decided to do their own bug bounty program. And so DJI were like, we're going to do our own bug bounty program and we're going to run it ourselves. Now, I want you to understand this. They're running a bug bounty program by themselves. They're not working with any of those platforms that help provide bug bounty or VDP, vulnerability disclosure programs, such as like BugCrowd, HackerOne, or HINAC. It was straight up in-house. Now, you'll start seeing some flags here that they didn't know what they were doing. But let's dive into their bug bounty program. So for the scope, the bug bounty program covers all security issues in firmware, application, and servers, including source code leak, security workaround, and privacy issue. So Kevin emailed them to double confirm the scope to be safe before participating. It took them 2 weeks to finally confirm the scope. 2 weeks on something that's already has been addressed elsewhere for them to agree, yes, that is the scope. That already gives you a flag. It took them 2 weeks to just let him know that, yes, that all those things that were listed in their program was in one scope. So anyway, he did decide to go ahead and report a vulnerability that he found, and he was provided with $30,000 for the finding. However, the agreement of receiving it offered no legal protection for him, so he walked away. The revelations basically resulted in the company challenging his findings and then threatening him with a lawsuit tied to the Computer Fraud Abuse Act, claiming he went out of scope regardless to the fact he made sure to confirm the scope. In return, he posted the entire situation with all the conversations with DJI publicly, and they withdrew. the best part was if you go to his blog post and want to read through this, one of the things that was really fascinating was that there was an internal chain about him that was within the email chain that he got an email from them. And within it, it was very noticeable that he saw him as a threat, a PR liability. And then that's why they served him a lawsuit. And I want you guys to understand something right now is that in the US right now, the things you need to be aware of when disclosing is that companies, local and state, will more likely try to sue you because of the CFAA and how it's written, so Computer Fraud Abuse Act, not federally. Reason for that is the DOJ has been doing a lot of work to try to change that, so they are not prosecuting hackers with the CFAA. So just note about that is companies, local governments, and state that are doing that more. And sometimes it's not even about, doing reporting of vulnerability. Sometimes it's just doing your actual job. And this is one of those cases. So in September of 2019, the Iowa State asked cybersecurity firm Coalfire to conduct a penetration test to see if its staff could gain access to sensitive data or equipment. 2 Coalfire employees found a door to the Dallas courthouse open, and when they closed the door to see if it would lock and then attempted to open it, an alarm was set off. Following the protocol, the employees waited for the police to arrive and showed them their paperwork. Initially, they were told they were good to go, but moments later, a local sheriff showed up and arrested them. They ended up spending the night in jail. Of course, the charges were later dropped of this year in late January, but it's one of those other examples that even if you're doing your job, you can still be prosecuted or even locked up in a jail when you're just doing your job. And this has a lot to do also with the whole thing was that maybe that sheriff didn't know the difference between a hacker and an attacker. Or maybe the sheriff didn't know too much about cybersecurity or security in general. And the reason I'm saying this is that still to this day, there's still not enough politicians that understand our industry. And because of that, they come up with legislation that ends up hurting us or accusing us of things that are not what's actually the truth. We're going to dive into another case study. So this one was a recent one between Giggle and digital interruption. This is an example why every company should have a vulnerability disclosure program. Basically, we see way too many cases when the hacking community draws attention to a major gap in security, only to have an organization ignore the warnings and even target well-intentioned hackers with threats. The statement by Giggle's team that they don't need a vulnerability program because they have a security team is so terrible, but it's so common. It's like the saying basically that I have a family doctor, so I don't need a specialist. Also, especially troubling are the reports of its user verification and data retention policies. According to the reports, the Giggle app geared towards teens and women actually puts its user populations at risk through its data retention policy because it gathers the kind of location information that stalkers and cyber attackers leverage to abuse victims. So it's reported that the Giggles app retains that data even when the users leave the community and delete the app. And the Giggles team actually misleads users, informing users that their data is purged when a user quits the community. Moreover, the Giggles verification process validates gender through facial recognition process that could potentially exclude so many women, including the trans community, gating membership solely to those who fit stereotypical and outdated notions about appearance of what is a woman, and designating who's a woman, discriminating based on appearance, leading many of us to wonder about the fundamental problems beyond Giggle's obvious reported cybersecurity flaws. And so when digital interruption contacted Giggle saying, hey, I found something. You can see this right there, the DM. They turn around and in the end, basically threatened them with a lawsuit. Not just that, campaign smearing of digital interruption, when all they wanted to do was let them know, hey, you need to fix this because you're working with a population that is prone to having some stalkers online and also causing cyber crime online, cyber attackers attacking women and girls. These are vulnerable populations, and yet they didn't even take security into consideration. So in itself, it was such a bad situation for Giggle, not for Giggle, but for digital interruption, because they were just trying to be good, to let them know. But in reality, it was misinterpreted as an attack. And then they started attacking digital interruption in the worst way possible. So I just want you guys to remember that, is that usually when people reach out to basically tell about a vulnerability that they found, and they don't have a vulnerability disclosure policies, what ends up happening is that it tends to be ignored or misunderstood. And that misunderstood is a huge problem, because that usually ends up being a threat of a lawsuit to the person who is just trying to share a vulnerability. Here's another case. So basically, a security researcher said he was forced to take down a blog post describing an apparent bug in Talkspace website that gave him a year subscription for free, after the company rejected his findings and sent the researcher a legal threat. Remember, security researcher, it could also be a hacker. John Jackson said he was able to sign up to Talkspace, a popular therapy app, as if he were an employee at one of the companies whose health insurance plans covers Talkspace services. And some of these sign-up links are found in the Google search results, some of which aren't even advertised on the company's website. Talkspace does not offer a way for security researchers to submit bugs, and with the help of TechCrunch, basically John Jackson was able to contact Talkspace to warn of the potential bug, fearing that malicious hackers or users could be abusing the system and claiming free therapy. But the company rejected the claims, telling Jackson that it has multiple internal processes in place to protect against abuses without providing specifics. And within hours of Jackson's publishing his findings on his blog, what TechCrunch has seen, Talkspace sent Jackson a cease and desist letter accusing the researcher of defaming Talkspace by broadcasting untruths in his blog post. Now, remember that whole thing that, Giggle also said, we have our own security team, so we don't need you. We don't need you to tell us about our vulnerabilities. That's what basically John also dealt with when it came to Talkspace. They rejected his, him just trying to share some findings because once again, it's a vulnerable situation, because Talkspace is, it's something that's supposed to do something good by providing therapy for folks. And so it's really important is that when it comes to therapy, that we're doing whatever we can to protect our customers. But once again, the reaction that they gave was not the best way, but we constantly see this happening all the time. Here are two other case studies. So the first case, the Motorola directory one that you see in that corner, basically a manufacturer of a baby monitor, Sean identified several vulnerabilities in a baby monitor, including the ability to view and control the camera while on the same network. And Sean tried several attempts to disclose his findings with the vendor, eventually with the help of a reporter, just like, the previous case that we went through. He was actually able to pass his findings onto the vendor, and it was fixed. The most worrying, the findings had actually been found several years prior. So remember that it's been reported, and it was not being fixed for many years before. Another case is Sean Wright. He found a logic flaw in their redirect to HTTPS for the login form for their site. They used JavaScript to do this for some reason. And this allowed the attacker to load the login from over at HTTP And Sean disclosed the vulnerability to the vendor, but did not receive any response at all, despite repeated attempts. And the issue was, however, magically fixed, which is another thing that we see. Sometimes we are completely ignored when we submit a vulnerability, but then somehow later down the months, it gets fixed magically without letting us know. So that's another thing. So remember, when people do report vulnerabilities and they don't have vulnerability policies in place, majority of the time when they try to connect with the organization or the company, they will ignore it or they will misinterpret it and then serve a threat of a lawsuit. So how do we fix this situation? You're probably wondering. There was a bunch of case studies there, but you do see patterns, right? Of good people that are trying to do something good, but are being seen as already a threat to these organizations. And that's because of the way that the public sees us. So if we want to change how organizations respond to us and how people, because it's people that are responding to us, not the organization, people, because people work at the organization, they run the organization, it's people. So we have to influence the public cycle. So in order to have rights for hackers, we need to get the public on board. And in order to do so, we need to dive into 3 categories. So organizations, legislation, and the media. We need the media to push for the public to become aware. In other words, we need to change the language and imagery of what a hacker is and start using the correct terminology such as cyber criminals, malicious actors, attackers, for those who committed unethical hacking, over really separating the two. Now, in order to help the media, organizations need to also be on board with bilateral trust with having vulnerability disclosure policies. By showing they support hackers, the public then changes their view in general. And lastly, to have the organizations and public opinion to push and motivate Capitol Hill to get on board and update the current legislation that will protect ethical hackers. Overall, we need all 3 of those categories in order to get hacker rights to become a reality. And so this workshop is going to teach you now how we go about influencing the public cycle. So this is a deep dive on how we're going to do this. So if you've seen my talk before, once again, it's just going to be a very lengthy version, but give you real world examples. So hopefully that works for you. But as you all know, I like to dive into the brain. So the first thing I want to go through is know how human behavior works. So the first thing first, I want you to be fully aware of what is a social construct. So socially constructed beliefs in general. So basically it's the idea that has been created and accepted by people in a society. And socially constructed beliefs, what you should know about it, it basically is this idea of what they see, experience, or what they've read, that they develop opinions about how the world works. But it's also socially constructed beliefs that sort out who's like me, who's not like me. So if we work and stay in the same community that we're in, we're never going to learn more about the world around us. The only times we learn about the world around us is through, movies, TV, the news, books, whatnot. And that's the problem right there. The thing is, humans, we don't like to go outside our bubble. We don't like to be wrong also. But the thing is that we're wrong all the time. And if you think you know everything, I guarantee you definitely don't. But the one thing I realized in my lifetime is that the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know enough at all. So the one thing to think about socially constructed beliefs is, say, for example, that when you were a child, you saw spiders and snakes were something that was bad and poisonous, so you stay away from them. And that was something that you really kept deep down inside. So if you were to see a snake or spider as an adult, you would be afraid, or you might be scared, or should we just say fear? And so then you would respond to that. So socially construction beliefs are basically things that you need to understand. It's your very beliefs, your essence of how you see the world through your own lens. but it's based on the people around you and the things you have seen and the things you have read. So, but I want you to understand one thing right here, right now, is that they're not always true. If anything, half the time they're true. So the whole thing that we need to do as human beings is constantly question everything that we learn and be okay to be wrong. Because the best times that we start realizing that we are wrong is the times that we start growing. And I know that's really hard to wanting to do, but that's how we're trying to get the public to do. We need the public to understand they shouldn't be afraid of us because they're afraid of us. I mean, you just turn on the TV or open the news or whatnot. What does it say about hackers? Oh, we're evil. We're trying to take money. We're trying to phish someone. We're trying to extort someone. And that's not what's happening here. It's attackers. And the images of us wearing hoodies, that's not helpful either. Because, hoodies are great and everything, but I mean, it's not what I wear all the time. Just at home. But anyway, that's what I want to talk about right now is fear. And so now you know what a social constructed beliefs are, and you understand that social constructed beliefs also create basically these beliefs that you then store as fear. Now we're going to dive a little bit deep into your brain. As you see in the image right there, we're going to dive into the amygdala. So the amygdala sits in your temporal lobe, which is important for processing sensory information and basically having input. Your amygdala is connected to your emotional response system. Now, I just want you to know that's completely subconscious, your amygdala. So when it's functioning, you have no idea what's happening. But what the amygdala does, it takes the beliefs that you have and sorts things that are, scary, the things that are not scary. Or it could also be things that are like me, things that are not like me. Or it could be stranger danger, right? So what happens is the amygdala, it's a survival mechanism, and you probably know of it from fight versus flight. And that's basically what it's supposed to do. It's a survival mechanism to let you know when you are in danger based on the things that you have learned and collected in your life. But once again, the amygdala is subconscious, so you cannot control it. However, the good news is that it has to verify. So what happens is that when the amygdala is alerted, and it will then send a message to the prefrontal cortex, and it checks to make sure that this is an actual legit threat, or you should be afraid or whatnot. And so it's very consciously aware at that point, and it uses logic to determine if it should act on that threat. They will come up with multiple different scenarios ahead of time, and then it would send a response back to the amygdala. Now, the thing is to note about is that a lot of threats are based around stereotypes and beliefs, and stereotypes and beliefs are from what? Socially constructed beliefs, right? Okay, I'm glad we got there. Anyway, I'm just assuming you're saying this, by the way. But anyway, the thing to note about it is that these stereotypes and beliefs can be questioned at this point. And this is the most important point right now for you to understand about human behavior, is that you can challenge and change people's perception on a belief that they have. But there's a catch here. They have to have a little bit of empathy and be okay with being wrong, which not too many humans like. However, if it's all around them that they're wrong, they might listen a little bit better. But to be honest with you, the good news is that research has shown that if someone came across someone, say for example, a hacker. Actually, I'll tell you a story. Let's do this instead. I'm going to tell you a story. So I was at a networking event, and it was in, I would say the art world. And in the art world at this networking event, someone came up to me and was like, "So, Chloe, what do you do? What kind of work do you do?" And I said, "Well, I work in the hacker community." And they're like, they took a step back, mouth dropped, eyes got bigger. And then I remember the partner was looking around like, okay, is there someone who can help me escape because there's a criminal in this room and I need to get far away? I don't know if my Bluetooth is on. She's probably going to get me. Like, I cannot trust this person at all. They are enemies. How could she even tell us this? You could definitely see something like that going on. But then the other person was like, so you are a hacker. So you do terrible things though. How did you get into this field and why are you so open about it? And then I explained very shortly saying, no. You need to understand there's two different groups here. There's attacker and there's a hacker. And the one thing you need to note is that hackers are your best friend. They're the everyday heroes you don't hear about. Unfortunately, a lot of mass media still is portraying hackers as these devious criminal behavior like people. And that's not what we are. We come in all shapes and sizes. We look and have all different ages. We come from all different backgrounds. But our number one job is to keep you secure and keep you safe and keep your loved ones safe. That is what we do. And it changed things in a sense where this person was open to hear and to hear a story. And then we just kept talking and talking. I think we talked for like 30 minutes and I shared some stories, like some case studies that you guys heard earlier about what are the issues that they're facing. And that's the thing is that we need to get outside of our community to try to get people to understand what we're doing and what kind of work we do. And what does a hacker look like? And that's the thing is people are curious. Okay. We're all curious. The reason we got into security, let's not lie here. It was because of curiosity. We wanted to know how far does it go? How deep does this hole go? And it's curiosity that drove us to this industry or drove us into this industry. And human beings are like that too. They want to know knowledge to a certain extent. They also want to reassure themselves that they're right. But the one thing to note is that you're not going to be able to change every single person on this planet about what is a hacker versus an attacker. But there will be people there that we can. And those are people that will hold empathy. Those are people that are okay with being uncomfortable at times because they understand that when we get outside our comfort bubble, we learn more about the world that we live in. But one of the things I wanted to tell you guys is that you now kind of know how the brain works in a sense that when you have socially constructed beliefs, they're stored in your memory, and your amygdala is a survival mechanism that's alerting of a warning or a danger. And it then sends a signal to the prefrontal cortex where you act like the CEO of your brain, dictating whether or not to take action or not and what action you should take, sends a message back to the amygdala to either calm down or relax. Calm down and relax or act on it. And the thing is to just note is that, like I said, it is still possible to change people's opinions. But the first thing we need to do is start getting outside our comfort bubble and go outside our community to start talking about who we are. And so I want to introduce you to the Hacker Stories Project. And this just got launched today. Hacking is not a crime. We had some of our advocates start doing videos for us. And basically you can participate too, by the way. But I want to first do this one. This is Blind Hacker. And I want to play this video for you. One second. I just need to make sure that this works on my microphone. Okay.
Hey guys, the Blind Hacker here, aka Joe B. Yes, I am visually impaired. Before you ask that question, it's really the name, but it's also I'm legally blind, visually impaired. Accessibility technology. I have Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, which means that my optic nerve doesn't grab the full picture of what my eyes see, transfer it to my brain. So there's fun in that. I do a lot here for the InfoSec community. Resume reviews, titles as leads, directors, other positions. So with that, I do a lot of accessibility toolage, listen to people's resumes. So I usually try to give them the best advice, like from that kind of point of view. Like listening to the resume is very much like an ATS or applicant tracking system, reading the resumes. So I kind of have the advantage there when kind of doing those resume reviews, a voiceover, read over. So a little cool random fact about me. So yeah, I'm a pen tester, a hacker extraordinaire, whatever. Use a lot of accessibility, a lot of technology to get my day to day done, including Linux, Windows, Mac. More partial to Linux and Windows, just with the more built-in accessibility. I know that some of it's out there for the Apple ecosystem. Hasn't been my cup of tea every time I've tried it. But needless to say, again, doing a lot for the community, trying to show that even people with accessibility or ally needs are able to do the job. I don't think there's any reason a person with full sight loss or any other type of physical disability or impairment should really prevent them from being able to do what we do. I can't speak for all disabilities and all different types of versions, but one of the things that I'm always willing to do is help any individual who says, here's where I'm struggling. I can go, these are the things that I've done to try to make it better for me. And give you advice from my perspective and say, hey, this is something that I think can help you out because it's something that helps me out. And it's kind of interesting. I get a lot of feedback on Twitter, social media saying, hey, I have just trouble reading, high resolution screens now. Hey, here's DPI. Here's a little suggestion. Get higher resolution screens and increase DPI just to make it more concise for quality and other control. It's little things like that that I think have given me the edge and advantage. Really successful in industry, and I can't say such a short amount of time anymore. I've got 15 years of experience and doing this for a while. But I only went public with the Blind Hacker a few years ago because I wanted to commit more to the community, not as me, but as a name that really represents that I am differently abled or disabled, which is not a bad word. And those are the things that I try to do for the community, give back on that pure basis of this is the things that I do, this is the way I do it. And when I stream and I YouTube, sometimes I do show my full screen with the zoom and the accessibility option going, but sometimes I don't. And that's because I want to teach from that perspective and teach people that, hey, this is what the things are. I go to conferences and I do CPFs and I try to sit with my back to the crowd. So more or less, hopefully people aren't stealing my flags, but hey, that this is not my quite like bold statement, but this statement that, yes, I'm different. Ask me about it because I want you to ask me about it because I want you to know that it's okay that I'm different and it's okay that I'm, do things a little bit different. But I want you to be curious about it because ultimately us learning together is going to involve a better world for everyone. So I kind of go with that, and that's why I still stuck with the handle Blind Hacker. Some people know me, Joe B, Blind Hacker, or whatever. But that's why I still stick to it because it's something again that means to me that it shows that, and that's why I do those things. That's why I stream those things. That's why. But I'm always open about the way and the reason I do the things, and I try to say, and I never say, hey, come to the dark side. This is the way I do something. Come do it the way I do it. I want to tell you this is the way I do it, so you can either make it better or you can make it yours. When I write toolage and accessibility things, parsing things for lots of just visual data, and that's why I do those things too, because I again want to show that our industry is capable of being inclusive and have a lot of that capability that we all know it has because we can do it together. On that note, thanks for taking a quick listen to my quick little bio chat here. And you can reach out to me at the Blind Hacker, at Joe B. And also, by the way, hacking is not a crime.
All right, just had to put my microphone back on. So if you remember from what I said earlier on when we're confronted with someone telling their personal story of who they are or the things that they do, it changes the way that we perceive them because now they're not a stranger anymore. It's not a stranger danger situation anymore because now you feel like you may have something in connection with him, or at least you feel this sense of compassion for him, because now it's not a stranger, because you heard something about him and his personal living, his own story of being a hacker. And you can also do this too, by the way. So the hacker stories, how it works is that it's very easy. You record a 2 to 8 minute video describing how being a hacker has impacted your life and share any vulnerability disclosure stories that you might have. The second step is you conclude the video with join me in supporting Hacking is Not a Crime by uploading a personal video like this one to YouTube. After uploading your video, be sure to update the title to #HackerStories, followed by your real name or handle. Fourth thing is post your video on Twitter, tag HackNotCrime, and include the #HackerStories. And then the fifth and the last one is Hacking is Not a Crime. We'll retweet it and upload it to our own YouTube channel and under our #HackerStories playlist. So you can participate in this too. The petition that I created at the beginning of this year was about pushing the community to be aware that we need to change the current legislation that we have, and we need to change the way that we're being perceived, and to acknowledge that the organizations, government, and the media play a huge role in it, but also the individual. So these type of stories, what I'm hoping to do is collect them from you guys and then start circulating it in the media and try to get people to understand and to see what we look like. I think that's the one thing, is that people are very curious to know what we look like as hackers, because they've always seen photos of us with ski mask or a hoodie and we don't see our face. So it's really cool to do something like this where we use social media to go outside of InfoSec. And that is the key thing right there. We want to get outside of InfoSec. We want this to circulate. We want people to see our faces. We want them to see that we are legit and good people. And there is something about when you tell your story, it changes the way people will perceive you in the future, or what you represent for the group. And that's the one thing you need to understand, is that every time that you are in public and you tell someone you're a hacker, you are then representing that community. And I really hope that sticks with you, because the reality of it is that by you being part of the community and sharing that you are in this community, outside the community, just note that you are now representing that community. You are a unofficial representative of the hacker community, and they will base all their stuff about the hacker community based off of you. Unfortunately, that's human behavior. So that's why these hacker stories are really important. So you can do this too. And if you need help on it, let me know. I'm more than happy to jump on a call with you for like 10, 15 minutes to talk about it, answer any questions. You can DM me. If you feel uncomfortable uploading on YouTube, but you want it on YouTube, contact me, or go to HackNotCrime on Twitter and DM. We are there to support you. We just want you to participate and to upload your video, because these videos are something really important. It's something beautiful of showing what we look like and the things that we do, and for the public to be aware of, we're not that masked, hooded figure. Now, the second step is how to influence the public perception of hackers. So we kind of talked a little bit about the individual, right? How fear is it holds us into a stranger danger position, because majority of people around the world have never met a hacker before. So all their beliefs of the hacker community is based on what they've been told directly from the media, from organizations and government. So it's one of those things you need to remember, is that they just don't know better. And I know that sounds really bad, because it's like, well, why don't they take time to understand more about us? Well, when was the last time that we took time to understand one of the things that they're going through, or with the type of work that they do? The reality is that we don't have that much time to dive into every little thing. And you just need to have understanding about that. But there are people that want to know about this, and they need to be challenged. So one thing is we need to challenge public perception. And how we do that is that we work with the media. So anytime you're wondering, what is the media? Well, media actually consists of marketing and press, and now it contains social media. So whenever I say the media, it means marketing, press, and social media. So don't forget about that. So anytime I use the phrase the media, now you know what it is. But just remember that socially constructed beliefs stem from the media too, right? So if the public's told constantly that hackers are bad people, they do all these terrible things, what do you think is going to do to the people that have never met hackers before? They're going to believe it because it's a reliable source, which it is. The news is a reliable source, depending where you get your sources, of course, but we won't go into that. That's a whole different talk to go into. But the first thing first is to know that socially constructed beliefs do stem from the media. But what I really want to go into is that it's also the imagery. So remember, images and words are powerful, so powerful, believe it or not. They're so powerful that it has caused people not trying to hear our story, or they don't know our story because it's not being reported. Okay. So the first things first is through imagery, it's definitely causing them to have fear towards us. So even though ethical hackers are not malicious actors, they're still being seen and treated as such. And because of this, it reduces the chance of reporting a vulnerability and can cause hackers to go on the dark side because they're seen exactly the same. And I'll get into that part later, I promise. But to the left is what you see when you type in criminal hackers. And to the right is what you get when you type in ethical hackers. Once again, hoodie and darkness, and sometimes with a ski mask, but it doesn't look any different. And it's not just the imagery, it's also language used in the media. And this is why I hate that they keep using the term hacker as someone as a criminal when they should use the term attacker, cyber criminal, malicious actor, and so on. Because in reality is that it hurts so much when the media doesn't know the difference between a hacker and an attacker. And I kid you not, it hurts because we see these stories. Well, first of all, the hackers can turn your home computer into a bomb and blow your family to smithereens. That just, yeah, okay. But the thing about hackers post pornography in a virtual classroom, that's not a hacker. A hacker doesn't do that kind of stuff. That's an attacker. You just don't do that. Like, morals, come on, people. Also, a hacker's threatening to leak patients' therapy notes. Oh, come on. This is not a hacker. This is a threat actor because this person is doing something, remember, who's doing it for immoral purposes. And that's the thing I want you to remember is that these things hurt because as someone who speaks out about the hacker community, I'm constantly battling against these stories, always. Also, these ones. Online school, how to protect kids from hackers and predators. So basically now hackers are predators. Also, hackers see opportunity in kids going to school online this fall. That's right. We turn on their cameras and watch kids. No, that's not what we do. Or a hacker serving a 20-year prison sentence for giving ISIS's personal data. Okay, first of all, it isn't a hacker. It's an attacker. It's doing something wrong. Once again, these are things that we need to understand is that we need to correct them clearly. So how do we go and correct them in the nicest way possible? So remember, reporters, they don't know better on this situation because we have these conversations more internally within our industry or more like within the hacker community. We don't really talk about it outside of the hacker community as much as we should. And that's a huge problem because we need that to get out more. So what we do is we have to correct the reporters to let them know in the nicest way possible, remember with empathy, that they need to do it a little bit better. So how do we change the situation? So if you are a reader, remember, these are the actions you can do. The first thing first, remember to be kind. No one's going to want to do anything for you if you're not nice. That's how the world kind of works. So one of the things we need to make sure is that we need to let reporters know that they need to do better. And by better, I mean to use the correct terminology. And we need to do it so they're nice and kind. And we're nice and kind. Remember, the one thing you want to take into consideration is they just don't know better majority of the time. They don't know that there's a difference between a hacker and an attacker because all the previous editors always use the term hacker when it was a criminal actor. So it's really important for us to understand that we have to make sure that we're kind, but we can point it out. So we can either DM or we could comment publicly, but make sure that when you do comment publicly, tag hack, not crime. But remember, you need to be nice, because I've seen some situations where the hacker community starts attacking a reporter. Not attacking, correcting, and be kind, because they don't know that it's supposed to be a hacker or attacker. They don't know the difference. So we have to basically be kind about it. So here are some examples that I have for you. So one thing that you can do is call it out on Twitter. So if you are talking about the news, here are some ways that you can do it. You basically just share out saying, like, for example, with John, he said, "Hello, Caroline. I would like to comment on this article. Hackers get a bad reputation, even though a lot of us secure organizations and give back to the community. Please call this what it is, cyber criminal," and sends threatening messages. That's one way how to do it, right? Is being kind. Remember, we're not correcting them harshly. We're giving them guidance and being kind to them. Or Casey Ellis. So his is, "Hey, The Verge, referring to the person who did this as a hacker gives him too much credit. This was a garden variety scripted spam, and B, gives a good actual hackers a bad name. Preferences would be troll, pest, or spammer." So these are ways you could be kind. Just note that this person doesn't know better on this front, and just assume that. But call it out. It's totally fine. But just make sure to tag hack, not crime, so then we can help with that conversation. If it needs to be taken offline through emails and talking to the reporter. That's what John Jackson was trying to do, is that from that messaging, we then got the email address of the writer, and then we started corresponding with her by email to get on a call. So these are things that you can do, is call it out on Twitter, but be kind, because they will not respond or take it seriously unless you're being kind to them. And remember, have empathy. They are not meant to doing it on purpose. Now, the next thing you can do is remember, the media isn't just the press, it's also marketing. So here are some other examples. So this Jason Street recently, he basically attended a session, I think at Sands, and basically he called them as street thug hackers. That's not appropriate. So basically he CC'd hack, not crime, and then he made this long chain of trying to explain why that's not the right way how to go about it. Or Jake Williams, trying to share what is ethical hacking and what it looks like, and that it's not illegal, and taking a screenshot of the situation. Or hacking is not a crime. What we did was that John, he basically posted, "Dear journalists, unless you are comfortable with someone breaking into your home, stealing the most personal information you have and making it public, don't publish hacked data. Hacking is a crime for a reason. It's theft." So we respond as, "Dear actors, movies in which you play the role of a hacker portray us as malicious villains. That stereotype has misled popular culture for decades. Theft and unauthorized access are illegal. The persona described herein is a cyber criminal, not a hacker." And so also correct it in that way. So we want to be kind, but we want to also make them aware of the correct terminology and giving the reason behind, which is that every time the wrong terms are being used, it hurts us as a community. It makes us move spaces backwards instead of moving forward on trying to bring about bilateral trust with the public and the hacker community. But the other cool thing that you guys can do is also give them kudos when they get it right. Well, we always do is that we give kudos to any time like an organization or a news agency, or pretty much actually, that we will then we'll be so happy that they said the right terminology. So for example, we applaud and thank for referring to these malicious persons as foreign actors and cyber criminals instead of resorting to using the term hackers. So we give applause. And so you can do that too. So anytime you come across an article and they use the right terminology versus hacker versus attackers, or uses the right imagery, give them a little like high five virtually in your tweets, and feel free to, send it on over to Hack Not Crime or tag us, because we're here to push out that messaging even more so. And we have your back, of course. But remember, you have to be kind. Please be kind to them. The reporters, they don't know. And I keep reiterating this, and you're probably like, I get it, Chloe, I get it. But I just want you to be sure that you understand it. Because reporters, we want them to listen to us, and they're not going to listen to us if we're yelling at them. Remember, empathy is about listening, but it's also, sharing of ideas and understanding how each other person is feeling, and the practice of trying to be in their shoes to understand their perspective without judgments. Now, the other thing you can do as a reader, you can always send a letter to the copy desk. So this is one of the things. Don't worry, we'll be working on using a letter that everyone in the crowd can use, so you can plug in. But basically send a long letter to the copy desk, not long, you want it one page only, talking about, how this hurts that they still use their terminology for all their articles for hackers versus attackers and whatnot. So that's one way how you can do it. Now I'm going to talk to those that work with the press. So what I mean are people that make comments to the press. So anytime there's a story and, a news agency contacts you, or your PR group contacts you saying, hey, can you give me a comment for this story that just was breaking news right now? Remember, be kind and understanding and be strong. But you need to remind the reporter there's a difference between a hacker and a criminal. Every time that I give a comment to the press, I always make sure there is a line in there about the difference between a hacker and a criminal, or I'll use the correct terminology in my comment. So then the reporter will use the right terminology throughout the article, unless they're quoting people, of course, because you can't change their words. And then also, if you can, point out how agencies supported or did not support the hacker community. And so if you're wondering what, I have an example for you. So here we go. So these are some comments that I gave to the press, I think about a couple weeks ago. But look at the highlights. So I did, in my comments themselves in the article, I put kudos to the CISA and FBI for bringing attention to this threat. It's designed to discourage participation and erode confidence in results. And then for the NSA one on the other side, I said, I'm glad that the NSA issued this report and whatnot. But then, but the one thing that was really disappointing in that report is that they referred to threat actors as hackers in it. So I did put a comment there. It's disappointing to see the NSA referring to threat actors as hackers. And the reason is that we have to let agencies know that, we're sad about it. We're disappointed. I mean, NSA, come on, you know the difference between us. You got to, that's your job. But that's the whole thing, is we have to also give kudos to when they get it right. So the FBI has been doing a really good job on that these days. And I know CISA has been really pushing that forefront this year and starting of last year, I think, too. So the thing is that it's really good to see these organizations doing that. So when you do give comments based on an organization, sharing some insights or reports or whatnot, make sure to give them kudos if they use the right terminology. If they don't, just, mention like, I'm glad that this report came out. It's important and everything. But I'm a little disappointed that they didn't use the right terminology. And that's okay. And also, if you are making any comments on a camera or whatnot with the press or any news agency, please don't wear a hoodie when on camera. And you're probably like, wait, what? Because to be honest, we are trying to change the perception of what a hacker looks like. And they really do believe that all we do is wear hoodies and we live in a basement. I kid you not. So we want to challenge that idea, and we want to use, it's okay to start using the term hacker versus security researcher. And you can also interchange it when you're giving comments. you can always let them know, like, I'm a hacker. We're also known as security researcher, and that's okay. The media just, they appreciate that, trust me, and the hacker community would be okay with that too. All right, now let's go more on the results of the media. So we kind of dive into what you can do to try to change how the media is portraying us and whatnot. But I want you to understand a little bit further of why it's important that we do that. Besides the socially constructed beliefs that are holding us kind of a hostage to moving forward and having rights and changing of legislation and whatnot, there's also a huge impact of it. And the reason for that is that 94% of Forbes Global 2000 still don't have a vulnerability disclosure policies in place. 60% of hackers do not report vulnerabilities, which is just, it's sad. Also, laws that prevent good hacking, the CFA and DMCA are definitely one of those. Also, prosecuting ethical hackers as well, because of, who reads the newspaper? Politicians do, legislators do. So legislators are just like every human being on this planet. They are also getting socially constructed beliefs from the media. And also they're not really working with hackers directly majority of the time or at any time, to be honest, of their career. And so they really don't know that, there are ethical hackers out there. But also the impact is that it can increase the number of bad actors. Now, this is the point I think earlier I mentioned that I would dive into. So I did interview a good number of attackers on this situation. And the reason that they said that they decided to move away from ethical hacking was the pay, of course, but also there was still that constant worrying of being prosecuted, regardless if they did something legal or if they got permission. They're always afraid that they constantly have to deal with that. And so it's like, well, this is annoying, so I might as well just be a bad actor at this point. But also I wanted to just point out that that's also one of the reasons why bad actors go into becoming hackers. And the reason for that was that the insomnia of being arrested for doing something and the guilt. And so that's one of the things is to note about it, is that the impact is very hard on us, and definitely hard I think just on the community in general. And I do believe that if things were to change, I believe there will be a lot less bad actors in the world when it comes to being attackers. I think it would give more of an opportunity for them to come to the hacker side. All right, so let's go into step 3, how to influence legislation. So we kind of talked about CFA a little bit, but we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But just overall, the laws that exist prevent good hacking in the same way they prevent attackers. And we really need good hacking right now, actually at any point. So let's dive into the worldwide legislation. So all around the world, just keep in mind that there's anti-hacking laws, anti-circumvention laws, and acceptable use policy. But in the US itself, the Computer Fraud Abuse Act is what we call our anti-hacking law. And our anti-circumvention laws is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or the DMCA. In Canada, it's called the Copyright Act. So simple. And then acceptable use policy. So I want to dive a little bit into all this stuff really quick, because the one thing, I know this looks very US-centric, but also note that it was the US legislation that really pushed other countries to follow as well. So anti-hacking laws, I believe, when they were made in the US, it pushed for Canada and Europe and other areas of the world to also push them forward too as well. So let's first dive into the CFA. So the Computer Fraud Abuse Act is a US cybersecurity bill that was enacted in 1984 as an amendment to existing computer fraud law, which had been included in the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. The law prohibits accessing a computer without authorization or in excess of authorization. Also is used when a hacker goes out of scope. This is the act used to prosecute hacking. Now, here's a little random fact, but you probably have seen this movie called War Games. Well, did you know that Ronald Reagan, he watched it and he freaked out about the hackers, and that is how the CFA was created, was because he watched that movie and he got really scared and was like, we need to do something about these hackers. And that's how CFA happened. because of that movie. Next thing. So anti-circumvention laws, these are basically the right to repair, so seeing reverse engineering as a breach of property to companies. Now, acceptable use policy, let's just be real right now between you and I. Who here has ever actually read terms and conditions for any product? Okay, so Apple, let's just go with Apple, okay? It's 50 pages long. And I remember I got like so bored and I was like, nope, I'm not going to do this. You know what? I probably signed my life away already a long time ago, but in general, they can be long and too much verbiage. It can confuse anyone, especially if you are an English learner. This can lead to some serious miscommunication issues for the hackers that don't really speak English well. Not to mention, it's so written for attorneys to another attorney to understand it, which is it's a horrible situation. But I just want to remind you guys is that all these laws are definitely out of date. And honestly, they were created out of fear. And we know about fear, right? They're used from socially constructed beliefs. And the socially constructed beliefs of the public is usually that we are the enemies. And the problem is that this is an ongoing problem in many legislations, but in reality is that legislation sometimes when they're created, it doesn't have representation of all parties that would be impacted by it. So all sides are not listened to. And this is the reason why we have so many problems with the current legislation in our country is because we're not allowing everyone who would be impacted by that legislation to have an equal voice and say in it. And because of that, this is one of the reasons why we have a problem, because there was no empathy or taking the time to understand what is actually needed when the CFA was created and why this law should only prosecute malicious actors such as criminals and whatnot, and not impacting the hackers that are doing something good. And I want to dive a little bit more in CFA because I hate it so much. And I think that you will too. So once again, CFA passed in 1984. Okay, we are in 2020, about to go into 2021. And can I just say for the record here is that I cannot wait for 2020 to change. But I also know that in 2021, I don't know how I'll be celebrating this new year because the thing that goes to our mind is anything actually going to change? Like, or is it going to be exactly the same? Like, are we going to be like, yeah, go 2021 like we did for 2020 and then all that stuff happened? Anyway, the whole thing is it's been a very long time and this needs to be revisited clearly. 1984, we're in 2020. Anyway, the thing is to know it's wildly outdated and it offers prosecutors discretion to threaten huge potential fines and jail sentences for relatively underserving violations of the computer policy. First, the CFA, as written, punishes exceeding authorized access to a protected computer, a phrase vague enough to inspire some really broad interpretations. Another flaw in the CFA is the redundant provisions that enable a person to be punished multiple times for the same crime. These charges can be stacked on top of another, resulting in the threat of a higher cumulative fines and jail time for the exact same violation. This allows prosecutors to bully defendants into accepting a deal in order to avoid facing a multitude of charges from a single solitary act. It also plays a significant role in sentencing. The ambiguity of the provision meant to toughen sentencing for repeat offenders of the CFA may in fact make it possible for defendants to be sentenced based on what should be prior convictions, but were nothing more than multiple convictions for the same crime. Most important to note is the CFA also gives companies the right to sue. And once again, hackers have more to fear from companies and states right now than the Justice Department. And there are even further things. The ramifications of these outdated laws has caused some serious issues in our community. And there's one case that I have to always talk about because it is one of those cases that really shows how the CFA can be used and really can be abused when it comes to hackers. So we got to talk about Aaron Swartz. So in 2011, Carmen Ortiz, the U.S. Attorney's Office, charged Schwartz with hacking into the MIT computer network to download millions of scholarly articles from JSTOR. It was an act of civil disobedience meant to protest the restricted access to research funded by taxpayers. And for this, the U.S. Attorney brought charges that carried a maximum penalty of 35 years in prison. I want to pause there. 35 years in prison. You know what? It's a first-degree murder in the U.S. It's 25 years minimum in prison. And he was looking at 35 years in prison, plus $1 million in fines. They were able to charge such years because of the way CFA is written and the issues that have yet to be sorted since it was made into law. So overall, looking at Aaron's situation, he was dealing with a 17-month legal battle, one that had no set trial date and wasn't ending anytime soon. And through Schwartz's perspective, it must have been so overwhelming. And not knowing how this legal battle is going to end up working, he ended up hanging himself in his apartment on January 11, 2013. Following his death, the federal prosecutors went on to drop the charges. His family said that the government's prosecution contributed to his decision to take his life. Aaron's story touched so many folks and realized that the CFA needs to be revisited and we need to do something about it. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, but the thing that was important was that the Aaron's Law was going to remove the phrase exceeds authorized access and replace it with access without authorization, which is defined as to obtain information on a computer that the accessor lacks authorization to obtain by knowingly circumventing technological or physical measures designed to prevent unauthorized individuals from obtaining that information. And it's sad that it didn't pass, but it would have definitely helped on changing how the CFA is written so it would be more going towards attackers versus hackers. But the other reason, if you're wondering, why it didn't pass, it was because of lobbyists. Some big tech companies have some pretty big pockets, and they wanted to make sure that it didn't pass. But the one case that I want you all to be aware of in this very moment is that the Van Buren versus US case. It is coming up on November 30th. Now, this might change depending on the election, the court date, whatnot, but it is something you need to be aware of. So a former Georgia police officer who was wrongly convicted under the notoriously vague Computer Fraud Abuse Act, CFA, once again, the thing that I hate, is asking the Supreme Court to reject a dangerously overbroad interpretation of the law. In Van Buren versus the U.S., Nathan Van Buren was accused of taking money in exchange for looking up a license plate in a law enforcement database. He was convicted of violating the CFA because he allegedly used that database for improper purpose, even though it was a database that he was allowed to access for work purposes. Under this expansive interpretation of the CFA, it would be a federal crime at any time a person violates a website's term of services. If violating terms of service is a crime, private companies will then have the ability to decide who goes to prison and for what. It puts us all at risk for everyday online behavior. So remember, November 30th is the date. If you want to get involved, there's ways how you can get involved. Just DM Hack Not Crime and we will set you up. But overall, with improvements to legislation, we can change where we stand today. But in order to do that, we must understand that you have a choice right now. And that choice is to make a change. And yes, it sometimes feels like the whole world is on your shoulders, but that's okay. Just note that you have other people that also have your back that will help take the load off of your shoulders. But the thing is that we have to come together and we need to start working forward towards this. So remember, with improved legislation, all Forbes Global 2000 will have a vulnerability disclosure policy. That means none of us hackers that are reporting vulnerabilities don't have to worry of getting sued or being misinterpreted or being ignored and then having some major breach happen because they didn't take us seriously in the first place. Also, 100% of hackers would report vulnerabilities. Wouldn't that be great? Also, laws that encourage good hacking. There wouldn't be any more prosecuting of ethical hackers. And it would decrease the number of malicious hackers because now they have a way in. So what can you do right now? Well, first, remember, we always want to be kind. Remember, be bold, but be kind. And vote. If you want to make a difference right here, right now, go out and vote. Voting closes very soon, so go out and vote. Vote like your life depends on it, because even if you're like, well, my state is not a swing state, so I don't really need to vote. No, you don't get how voting works. Voting helps local communities. It helps your local county. It helps your city. It helps your state. And then lastly, it helps federally. But if you don't want to do it because you're like, oh, I'm not in a swing state and I know my state's going to go for this president and not that president, still go out and vote. For the first time in history, we have more access to voting than before. And you also need to know that there are some groups out there and people that are preventing from every single person to be able to vote that is a citizen in this country. And it's also for us to support them and make sure that we volunteer right now, virtually or physically, if you can, if your health can do so. There's ways how you can make sure that every single US citizen who has the ability to vote can vote. There's just too many practices happening right now where discrimination is being applied. And also there are people putting restrictions of when people vote. And you just need to be aware of your vote matters. It counts. And if you are a US citizen, it is your duty and your job to vote. And also, you need to know your local representatives. I think most of the time is that many Americans, we don't know who our local representatives is. So you need to know who they are, because when the Van Buren versus US case or any cases come up which impacts you or the hacker community, you need to know who to call or who to contact. So if you're wondering how to do that, all you simply need to do is just go to, your House of Representatives, type in your zip code and look it up. And once again, I apologize, this is US centric on this part, but you should also know where you are located, because voting matters to you too. It is your job as a citizen in that country to vote. So it really doesn't, it's still applicable here, but you should also know who your local representatives are. So go to your, make sure that you know about that too. And keep informed about all the local cases that are coming about or legislation that might be going through the House. You need to be aware of it. So first things first, what you want to do is once you find out who your representatives are, contact them. You can do it through email, by phone, do both, and try to get a meeting. And this could be like 5 to 15 minutes usually. And when you do that, this is the one thing to note. So you've scheduled a meeting with them. High five, first of all. Then you want to contact Hack Not Crime to join you for that appointment. You should never go alone, but I want you to understand what that goal is of that meeting. It isn't you telling them how they should go about this legislation or how to fix the situation. The goal is to know what they're passionate about fixing. Do some research. I know you all are good at researching, okay? That's why you're in this business, but look into what are the things that they're passionate about and the things that they haven't been able to fix yet. And find out what they're passionate about fixing, and then use that to find that common ground on the issue and how the hacker community can help. They need to understand that we're also there to help support them. That is the beauty of who we are as a community. We help each other out, and we can certainly help other people out too outside of our community. And we just need to find out what the representatives, what they are passionate about, how we can help them, and also to see where we can have common ground there too. And don't go at it alone. Please never do that. It's better to have someone with you. All right, step 4, how to collab with organizations. So we talked a little bit about legislation. Now we're going to go into organizations, but first, disclosure. We went through some case studies earlier about disclosure and what happens. And I just want to point out once again, with disclosure, every single organization needs one at this point. You should have one, because the reality of it is that 1 out of 4 hackers don't disclose. So according to HackerOne, they had a 2008 hacker report, and basically found that 1 in 4 hackers do not report a vulnerability because the company in question didn't have vulnerability disclosure policies. Those who did try to notify the company through other channels, such as email or social media, like we saw in those case studies earlier, the hackers claimed that they're frequently ignored or misunderstood, which once again, we saw in the case studies. So this is why it's important to have disclosure policies. Because one thing is, if you're wondering still at this point, why is it only 1 out of 4 hackers, they don't disclose? Well, let me let you know, this is the reason why. Besides the prosecution of submitting a vulnerability and the threats, or just knowing that you're going to be ignored, the issue is looking for contact information for that company and reading policies if they have one in place, or if they don't have one in place, and searching for it can be such a burden. Sometimes it takes hours, days, and weeks to find the right person to contact to disclose something. And even if they're hired as a hacker themselves at a company, they can still get prosecuted, as we saw earlier. And not just that, sorry, I was losing my voice there. Community consensus overall is that language of what's in scope or out of scope when disclosing, or how to disclose, can be so scary, and potential indictments especially. It keeps all parties awake at night. I mean, the program manager in general, they're asking to be hacked but not get hacked badly. And how to handle situations, and researchers are reporting something is something that they're still working on. But organizations and government all know it's needed at this time to have vulnerability disclosure policies. And CISA has been really pushing that out right now. So why vulnerability disclosure? Well, go ahead, look at this list, read it. Yes, it does reduce breaches, if you're wondering. Because if someone lets you know about a vulnerability before an attacker finds it, boom, it reduces your chance of having a breach. Diverse backgrounds find bugs that security team misses. This is how bug bounty has basically thrived more than ever before. Because the reality is that you cannot always rely on your own security team to find all the vulnerabilities. Sometimes you need people outside of your team to find the vulnerabilities that your team missed. And that's okay, because in reality, that's most likely going to happen. So it's so important is to have diverse backgrounds, people from the public, to be able to find bugs and be able to report it. But also it's really important to have bilateral trust. So having vulnerability disclosure policies allows for organizations and hackers to have this bilateral trust, and also it keeps security in check. And let's be real, you cannot rely on scanners to know what to patch and what's critical for you to patch. The thing is that I see so many companies when they start their security, or they're not investing in security at all. They'll just be like, well, we just rely on our scanners. And that's how we know when we need to fix something or what we need to fix. The reality is it's not in real time. It's not, you don't even know how to prioritize. This is why, once again, bug bounty is very successful, because they've realized you need diverse backgrounds to be able to find bugs that your team couldn't, or even machines couldn't find for you. Because in reality, all that stuff was created by humans anyway, and the human element is still apparent in security. So how can we improve it? So if you have vulnerability disclosure policies at the organization that you work at, wonderful. But make sure you say what's in scope and what's out of scope. Don't write it for attorneys, write it for English learners. Remember, have basic English, be straight to the point. Don't make it long in verbiage. Just keep it short and concise, because once again, you're not writing for attorneys to read it. You're writing it for the hacker community to read it, so they are aware of what's okay, what's not okay, right? So if you want better communication with the hacker community and when they're reporting vulnerabilities, I highly suggest you getting more basic on your descriptions and your policies. You need to also list contact information. We need to know who to contact. And communication with every update. It's really important that you keep the hacker community updated when it comes to when they submitted a vulnerability, because the hacker community appreciates that. So just do that. And one of the other things, this is something that we need to talk about, is that you need to make sure you also have someone who could handle all those submissions, who can manage it, know which one needs to be prioritized, and who to task it with. I've seen times where companies like, okay, we're going to do a vulnerability disclosure program and we're going to run it in-house, but in reality, they didn't have someone who can dedicate their time and energy to do that. And so then they don't communicate with the hacker. And then next thing you know, it gets dropped and the vulnerability is not fixed. And then sometimes it can end into a breach. So it's really important for you is to have a dedicated person if you're going to do vulnerability disclosure policies. But if you can't, it's okay. You can also look into platforms that can provide a VDP, vulnerability disclosure program, such as BugCrowd. Also, HackerOne has them too. But the thing is you just look into those, and they're lower cost than bug bounty usually. So it's definitely an option that you can do. And if you are a nonprofit, I believe that BugCrowd does extreme reduced rates, or it can actually do it for free. I'm not quite sure, but you should check in with them if you are in that state. Another thing you can do, so how to improve it, or if you want new ideas, I say get involved with disclose.io. So disclose.io, they have a listing on GitHub of all the organizations that practice vulnerability disclosure policies and where you can find them, such as contact information, the policy URL, what to expect as well. It's really, really cool site to check out because it's all community-based, that everyone has been submitting all the different organizations that have disclosure policies. So you can actually find companies that would be okay to report vulnerabilities to, so you're aware of their disclosure programs or policies. But also, if you are right now trying to figure out how to write your disclosed policies, they have a really good one for you. So go ahead and check out disclose.io. It's a really good place to have an idea of like how to start a disclosure policies. And also, if you're someone in the community that has kind of an idea of organizations that also have disclosure policies that aren't listed on the disclose.io GitHub, you should definitely send it in. Anyway, you should definitely get involved with disclose.io. This is the ways how you can do it. So besides disclosure, we already talked about when it comes to organizations. There's another way that you can do work with organizations. You can volunteer. And I have some good organizations for you guys to volunteer for. So first, the EFF, as you probably are aware of, they basically are champions of user privacy, free expression, innovation through impact of legislation, policy analysis, grassroots activism, technology development. Basically, they're trying to do whatever they can to fight for rights of our privacy and protect us as consumers. So it's a really cool thing. You can get involved by becoming an EFF member. There's also an action center that you can get involved, and also they have further information of other volunteering options. Another one is I Am the Cavalry. Basically, they're a volunteer organization devoted to improving security of 4 main focus areas, such as medical devices, transportation, and connected homes and infrastructure. You can email them. There's the email, and also you can contact them on Twitter. They also have an email that you can contact them. So you can find out how you can get involved. CertCC is an awesome organization. Basically, they aim to increase the overall U.S. cybersecurity posture by developing and operationalizing and improving government and industry organizations' incident management capabilities so they can protect themselves from attacks and limit the damage and scope of attacks. The really cool thing, how you can get involved, is there's courses, they have services and whatnot. But the really cool part is that if you need help reporting a vulnerability, they might be the person for you to look at if they don't have a vulnerability disclosure policy. and they are ignoring you or anything like that when you try to disclose it to the company, they might be a good place to get started. Also, CTI League. So CTI League is the first global volunteer emergency response community defending and neutralizing cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities to life-saving sectors related to the current COVID-19 pandemic. You can get involved. There's an application form. There's also an email. It's a really cool thing to be a part of, to see this year. It's really taken care of. I would just say it's really helping in many ways. And it's one of those things that is very proud to see the community sticking its neck out to try to help and volunteer their time and their energy to protecting others. So summary, I know this is a lot of information, but I hope this workshop helped you understand how you can take actions. But you can also get involved by visiting hackingisnotacrime.org. But remember, you can become an advocate with us if you want. You have to have a referral though at this time. So if there is an advocate who already is part of Hacking is Not a Crime, they would need to refer you as an advocate. But don't worry, there's also opportunities of volunteering as well. So if you want to be a volunteer, feel free to reach out to us. Also note to volunteer and support organizations that are working to help the community. And you can also record a video and participate in Hacker Stories project, which is this new thing that we just went live with today. So you should come and join us. Also work with the press and keep them informed. Remember to always be kind and have empathy when you're talking to people outside the community, and even when you're in the community. The one thing I have to admit, there's definitely been times where I'm like, I am done with the InfoSec industry. The thing that keeps me where I am is because the community. So please remember that we have done so much and we have come so far as a community. And we're just at the very beginning of something very beautiful here. And that is to change where we stand right now and to get rights, to bring better awareness of who we are. This is a moment for us. And so you can be part of that. And I just want you to remember this. And this is the most important thing, that if you didn't pay attention at anything or have so many questions out of your mind, just please remember that change starts with you and me. And it's one of those things that it's a real passion for many of the people that work and volunteer their time at Hacking is Not a Crime, because we know someone at some point who has dealt with the ramifications of being a hacker and trying to do something good and then being taken in the wrong direction. And we've heard too many of these cases and stories that it seems like it's just every day at this point. Like maybe there's something like this that happens every hour at this point. And it's sad. It's very sad to see. It's sad to see what it does to our community. It's sad to see what it does to the hacker who was just trying to help. But I just want to give you hope and faith that, don't give up. That's the one thing I've learned in life, is that no matter what is thrown at you, you just don't give up. You keep going forward, because life doesn't stand still and we still have time. And let's use that time for the good part of this community and have their backs and push forward into bringing better public perceptions of who we really are. Because that's what social media is all about, right? Is sharing our stories, sharing our experiences with the world. And it's time that we start doing that more. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for existing. Thank you to Gray Hat for having me. I don't even know the words sometimes, but I'm truly thankful to be in this community. And I want to thank you guys for having me in this community, accepting me for who I am, and for being there for me. So thank you guys so much. And if you need anything, feel free to reach out. My DMs are always open. If you want to get involved, just don't go at it alone. We are here. Hacking is Not a Crime is here for you, to protect you and also to be there for you. So please don't forget that. And thanks again, and Have a good rest of your day. And if you have any questions at all, I am online, so feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you guys. Take care and stay safe and vote.